In August of 1889, in a farming village in Columbiana County, Ohio, 3 young people drank from the family well, a sister and 2 brothers, 18, 21, and 23 years old. The federal report that recorded it says all 3 were in robust health. All 3 were dead inside of 10 days. Nobody shot them. No outlaw, no ambush, no Cattletown shootout. The water was clear. The water was cold. It tasted sweet coming up out of that bucket, and it was carrying something none of them could see or smell or taste. The gunfighters got the story, friend. The well got the graves. Here is the twist. The water was not the enemy. What they did not do to it was the enemy. And what they did not do to it would have taken 1 minute over a fire. It has a name. Making your own water safe. Siting, the well, settling, heat, chemistry, and the hold. The way your great-great-grandmother took a hole in the ground and a seep on a hillside and kept 9 children alive on it, with no chlorine, no city main, and no filter you plug into a wall. I will walk you through every piece of it the way it was done. Every piece except one. If the tap in your kitchen ran brown tomorrow and stayed brown 3 weeks, could you keep your family drinking safely off a creek behind the house? Most grown men in this country could not. Their great-grandfathers did it daily without thinking, and one piece of this skill got stripped so completely out of the telling that I would bet my hat you have never heard a soul say it out loud. It is the piece that separates the households that drank and lived from the 3 graves in Columbiana County. I am Silas Mercer, 7th generation on this ridge. The Mercers have held this stretch of the Appalachians since the 1790s. My grandfather Eli raised me after my daddy died in the timber, and before he went, he made me copy everything he knew into a leather journal. This is me keeping that promise, and I will tell you plain. This skill did not fade because it stopped working. It faded because a city main and a plastic bottle solved the problem for you, and there was never $1 in reminding you how to solve it yourself. By the time we are done, you will know the one distance in feet your great-grandfather paced off before he picked up a shovel. You will know why water that looks clean and water that is clean are 2 different things. You will know how many seconds at a rolling boil and how many drops in a gallon. And you will know the last piece, the one those 3 in Ohio had no idea existed. Do me one thing before we start. Subscribe. Not as a favor to me. Because of what we dig back up here, you will want the next one. There are 6 pieces to doing this right. 6 in order. Miss one of the first 5 and you might get sick. Miss the 6th and you can do all 5 perfectly and still bury somebody. Most people get the first 3 about half right. The 4th is where the survival books stop. The 5th they get backwards. And the 6th has been gone from the talk for 100 years, though it was once written into federal law. So the real question is not what we forgot. It is who cashed the check when we forgot it. Piece 1. The source and the siting. This starts before you carry a single bucket. It starts on foot, walking your acreage slow, watching where water goes when it rains. Not where it stands, where it goes. Because water moves downhill underground, the same as it does on top. Slower, quieter, through gravel and cracks in rock, but downhill. So your well or your spring goes uphill of every filthy thing on the place. Uphill of the privy, the barnyard, the manure pile, the hog pen, and the graves. Uphill, not level with, not near, uphill. Then the distance. The modern rule of thumb is 100 feet minimum between your well and any livestock pen, manure pile, or septic system. State codes run from 50 feet to 150. Missouri wants 100 and prefers 300 for manure storage. Take the bigger number every time. And here is the part almost nobody tells you, straight out of the federal government's own farm bulletin. In 1922, a man named George M. Warren wrote, United States Department of Agriculture Farmers Bulletin, 1227 for farm families. And Warren said flat out that distance alone is not enough, and neither is sitting on higher ground, because the zone of filth around a place reaches farther than you would guess, and reaches downhill worst of all. His safeguard came down to 5 words: clean ground and wide separation. So here is your this week. Walk the place after the next hard rain, with nothing but your eyes. Mark the low corner where water pools, because that low corner is where you do not dig. A ledge spring high on a slope is your best water. A seep in a pasture bottom, below the cows, is your worst. Then pace off 100 feet from every pen, pile, and septic tank. That is your water. Every farm in America had that ground. So does yours. Next piece is the hole itself, and the mistake 9 out of 10 people make that turns their own well into the thing that poisons them. It is not the depth. You would be surprised. Piece 2, the vessel in the ground. This is where the shallow well earned its reputation. Your great-grandfather's dug well ran 3 to 6 feet across, and maybe 20 deep, lined with laid-up stone or plank cribbing. And here is the thing about that lining. It was never there to hold the water in. It was there to hold the ground out. Every inch of curb that let surface water run down the outside of that wall was a straight pipe from the barnyard to the bucket. So the curbing stands above the ground, not flush with it. 6 inches at the least. A foot is better. The dirt around the wellhead gets sloped away in every direction, so rain runs off, not in. And the top gets a tight cover, not a board laid across it, a cover, and a spring gets the same care, dug back to the ledge, boxed tight, ditched on the uphill side, because plenty of mountain springs are just surface water that went down a sinkhole a quarter-mile uphill and came back out, having filtered through nothing at all. This week, stand at your wellhead or your rain barrel and answer one question. When it rains, where does that water go? In or away? If it goes in, that is one Saturday with a shovel. Now piece 3, and this one is a trap, because piece 3 is the piece everybody thinks is the whole skill. Piece 3, settling and straining. Picture your great-grandmother with 2 crocks in a square of linen, pouring creek water from one into the other through the cloth, or a barrel on the porch, water standing overnight, mud on the bottom by morning. Both work. Let water stand and the silt drops out. Pour it through tight-woven cloth, and you catch the leaves and the wiggling things. Run it through clean sand with charcoal underneath, and you take out the color, the cloudiness, and most of the taste. That is municipal engineering, just smaller. And here is the trap. Sit with this one, because it is where the frontier myth lived. Settling makes water clear. Straining makes water clear. Sand makes it clear and cold and better tasting than anything in a plastic bottle. And clear, sweet, cold water will kill your children, just as dead as muddy water will. Because what killed frontier families was never the mud. Typhoid, cholera, dysentery, what they called the bloody flux, giardia, every one of them invisible, odorless, tasteless. There is no amount of squinting into a dipper that will tell you one thing. Dr. John Snow proved that in London in 1854. Cholera broke out in Soho, killed about 500 people in 10 days, and Snow traced them to a single pump on Broad Street. But when he examined that pump water, he found so little visible filth in it that he nearly talked himself out of his own conclusion. The pump was draining a leaking cesspit next door, and it looked fine. So here is the survival myth, and it is the whole reason we are here. If it is clear, if it is cold, if it tastes sweet, then it is safe. That myth killed more homesteaders than every gunfight in the history of the American West, and it is not close. This week, get a settling bucket and a square of tight cloth. But understand what you just did. You made water clean. You have not made it safe. Piece 4 is where safe starts. Piece 4, the heat. This is the piece that actually kills what is in there, and it is insultingly simple. Bring the water to a rolling boil and hold it 1 full minute. That is it. Above 6,500 feet of elevation, make it 3 minutes. That is the standing guidance from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and the surest method there is. Viruses, bacteria, parasites, all of it, including Giardia, including the one I will tell you about shortly, that laughs at chlorine. And it is not 10 minutes, whatever you were told growing up. That was old advice nobody has needed in decades. 1 minute down low, 3 up high. Every minute after that is firewood. And the honest limit, because I am not handing you half a skill. Boiling kills living things. It does not remove chemicals. And because it carries water off as steam, it leaves fuel and nitrates and lead behind and concentrates them. Water with a chemical problem you do not boil. You do not drink it either. This week, know your pot and know your fuel. If your stove is electric and the power is what failed, boiling on a cold coil is a plan that does not exist. A propane burner, a camp stove with fuel put by, a wood stove top. Have one before you need it. Pattern break, friend. Everything up to here your great-grandmother could have walked you through on a rainy afternoon. What comes next is where the graves are, the numbers, what one careless act did to an entire American town. And the 6th piece, the one that mattered so much the government banned a household object over it, and then everybody forgot it had ever been a skill. Hold the myth of the American West up against these numbers. The historian Robert Dykstra went through the actual records of the Kansas cattle towns. Dodge City, in its wildest stretch, from 1876 through 1885, produced 15 documented homicides. 15 in 10 years. Deadwood's worst year on record was 4 killings. Tombstone's worst was 5. The gunfight at the OK Corral killed 3 men in about 30 seconds, and it became the most famous half-minute in American history, precisely because that almost never happened. Now the water. Roughly 1 in 10 of the 350,000 people who went west on the Oregon and California trails died on the way. The National Park Service's high estimate is that disease alone may have killed as many as 30,000 of them. Cholera was the worst of it, about a third of all emigrant deaths, and in 1850, a Missouri newspaper reported an average of 1 death per mile on one stretch of trail. And the killings? John Unruh counted every recorded death from conflict between emigrants and native people from 1840 to 1860. 362 emigrants, 362 over 20 years, against as many as 30,000 from disease. And it did not stop when the wagons did. In 1900, typhoid killed about 35,000 Americans. By 1950, it was effectively zero. Nothing changed about the germ. Everything changed about the water. Now the town. Plymouth, Pennsylvania, 1885. About 8,000 people drawing their water off a mountain stream. Through that winter, one man lay sick with typhoid in a house on a slope less than 80 feet from that stream, and his night nurse carried the man's waste out into the dark and threw it on the frozen hillside. All winter, 3 months of it, sitting on the ice above the town's drinking water. Then in late March it thawed, and it rained. 3 months of filth went down that hill and into the reservoir about as fast as a man could walk it. 15 days later, the epidemic broke. When it was finished, roughly 1,200 people out of 8,000 had been sick, and better than 100 were dead. That federal bulletin said probably no epidemic in American history better shows the dire results that can follow one thoughtless act. One nurse, one hillside, one thaw, 100 coffins. Piece 5. The chemical, and the one bug that beats it. Sometimes you cannot boil, no fuel, or 100 gallons to treat, and 1 bottle of propane. So you have a second tool, sitting in your laundry room right now. Plain, unscented, household bleach. The current federal guidance is 8 drops of 6% bleach per gallon of clear water, or 6 drops if your bottle reads 8.25%. A little less than 1/8 of a teaspoon. Stir it, let it stand 30 minutes, then smell it. It should carry a faint whiff of chlorine. If it does not, dose again and give it 15 more minutes. Cloudy or cold water, double it. Unscented only. No lemon scent, no color safe, no gel. And bleach loses strength on a shelf, so a 3-year-old bottle is not one to bet a child on. Now the thing almost nobody knows, and it is why I put heat ahead of chemicals. Chlorine does not reliably kill Cryptosporidium. Crypto rides inside a hard shell, 4 to 6 microns across, that shrugs off chlorine at drinking water strength and can survive days in treated water. Boiling kills it. A filter rated absolute 1 micron, or certified to NSF standard 53 for cyst reduction, takes it out. Chlorine alone will not. If that sounds like a small point, ask Milwaukee, where in 1993, crypto came through a filtration failure into a chlorinated city system, and an estimated 403,000 people got sick. At least 69 died. Clear water, treated water, deadly water. This week, put a bottle of plain, unscented bleach on the shelf with the date written on it in marker. And if you buy one filter in your life, buy the one whose box says absolute 1 micron, not the one that says purifies. Now, 5 pieces done. And this is exactly where those 3 in Ohio stood, and where many a careful household stood and still buried somebody. Because there is a 6th piece. Piece 6, the hold. What you do with the water after it is already safe. Picture the kitchen. The kettle has boiled. The water is safe, completely safe. Your great-grandmother pours it into a crock in the corner of the room. There is a cloth over the crock, maybe, and hanging on a nail beside it, on a string, is the dipper. One dipper, everybody's dipper. It has been in 9 hands today, and 3 mouths, and it got set down on the table where the chicken was cut. She just poured clean water into a contaminated system. Every single thing the fire killed came right back in on the tin. That is the 6th piece, recontamination. The most forgotten step in the skill, because we solved it with an object instead of a habit, and the object got so ordinary nobody remembers it was ever life and death. In the early 1900s, a Kansas doctor named Samuel Crumbine, who ran that state's Board of Health, went to war on the common drinking cup, the shared tin dipper on the train, in the schoolhouse, at the town pump. Kansas passed the first state law against it in 1909. By 1911, 7 states had banned it outright. More than 30 state boards of health had condemned it, and better than 40 railroads had thrown their dippers out on their own. And on October 30th, 1912, the federal government banned the common cup aboard interstate trains. Hold that a second. The first national drinking water regulation this country ever wrote was not about the water. It was about the cup. The replacement was a little paper cup, sold at first as the health cup that you know today as the Dixie cup. The drinking fountain spread for the same reason. Both made somebody a fortune, and the habit they replaced went out of the culture entirely. So here is the 6th piece as a rule you can hand your grandchildren. Safe water goes into a clean, scrubbed, covered vessel, and nothing ever goes back into that vessel. A jug you pour from, not a bucket you reach into. Never a hand. Never a cup that has been anywhere. Never a dipper that lives on a nail. And if you must dip, one dedicated long-handled dipper that hangs inside the lid and gets boiled with everything else. The federal wording is the plainest sentence in the subject. Store boiled water in clean, sanitized containers with tight covers. You can boil for an hour and undo every second of it with one dirty tin. Now I will give the devil his due, because I will not lie to you to make a better story. What ended this slaughter was not households getting smarter. It was engineering. In 1908, in Jersey City, New Jersey, a physician named John Leal put the first continuous chlorination system in America onto a public water supply, and that city's typhoid death rate collapsed. 2 economists, David Cutler and Grant Miller, later found clean water accounted for nearly half the total drop in death rates in major cities, at a return better than 23-1. There is no honest way to call that anything but a triumph. Nobody stole this skill from you, neighbor. Not a conspiracy. Just how markets work. The problem got solved so thoroughly that a household no longer needed to know, and 1 generation is all it takes. Those 3 young people in Columbiana County did not die because their water looked bad. It looked fine. It did not taste wrong. It came up cold out of the ground the way good well water does. They were 18 and 21 and 23, and every one of them was in robust health. They died because that well took in whatever the barnyard sent it, and nobody in that house ever put the water over a fire for 1 minute. 1 minute, 3 graves, 10 days. So here is your skill, whole and yours. Water uphill and 100 feet off, curbed and covered, settled and strained, and clear is not safe. Then heat, 1 minute at a rolling boil, 3 above 6,500 feet, or 8 drops of plain unscented bleach per gallon, and 30 minutes, knowing chlorine does not touch crypto, and heat does. And then the piece the paper cup made you forget. Pour, and do not dip. Uphill, covered, clear, boiled, and never dipped. That is what your great-great-grandmother lived by, and what those 3 in Ohio died without. This was never really about a well, neighbor. It was about being a household that cannot be shut off. When the main breaks, your family drinks. When the advisory goes out over the radio, you are not in a parking lot fighting over pallets of bottled water. You walk to the creek, settle it, boil it 1 minute, pour it into a clean covered jug, and go on with your evening. Nobody calls that prepping. It is competence, and it belonged to your family before it belonged to a utility. You do not have to dig a well this weekend. Do one thing this Saturday. Fill a clean jug with tap water. Write the date on it. Set it back. Find your boiling fuel and put your hand on it. Then take every dipper in your house off its nail. Somebody in your line knew every word of this. The chain just broke somewhere. Tonight we spliced it. Tell me down below, did your people have a well or a spring? Did anybody in your family boil, or did they simply trust the water? The story that gets the most comments is the one I go deep on next. Next time, the $2 barrel of lime that kept a homestead privy from ever poisoning its own well, and the reason the county quietly stopped explaining it. If this was worth your evening, hit subscribe and stay with me. Keep the old ways they kept.